The theory of mind only. When the Sutras says that all things are nothing but mind, what is meant by it? Does Citta refer to the Alaya, or to the whole system of the Vijnanas, or to the interaction of the Alaya and the Manas? When it is said that Citta is under the bondage of Vishaya, Sitarh Vishaya Sarhabandham, as on page 130, or that bondage is mind-made, Bandhanam Citta Samhavam, on the same page, what is meant by this Citta? What does the phrase, Svasiddhad Rishya Matra, or Cittavikal Palaksha, which occurs so frequently throughout the Lankavatara, really refer to? When mention is made of purrying the outflows of the visible world from one's own mind, what is this mind? In my view, Citta, or mind, refers in some cases to the Alaya alone, in other cases to Manas, or even to the whole system of Vijnanas. When the Sutras says that if there is no revulsion in the Alaya Vijnana called by the name of Tathagata Garbha, there will be no extinction of the 7 functioning Vijnanas 3, or that when the Tathagata Garbha is united with the 7 Vijnanas, from attachment arises dualism. And that when this is thoroughly perceived, the error is removed, we realize that the Alaya is the most important conception on which the whole mechanism of the psychic life hangs. Mind only must then mean that there is nothing but the Alaya Vijnana. In fact, the Alaya is a depository of all kinds of karma seeds, good as well as bad. And so long as it is not stirred up by Vishaya, the principle of individuation, it will remain tranquil, retaining its original purity or neutrality, inefficiency, aloofness, and the primary quality of not being contaminated by defilements. However, the Alaya is always found in company with the 7th Vijnana or Manas, and when it is found working, all the other Vijnanas are in action. This being the case, the mind only may also involve the whole mental apparatus, especially with the Alaya strongly in alliance with Manas. It may be more appropriate to consider Citta designating the whole system of Vijnanas as a unit, instead of looking at each Vijnana as an independent yet interrelating element. The whole mind is then conceived as operating or functioning in 8 different modes, while each mode also shares in the general activity of the mind either as Citta or Vijnana. Unless Citta is especially referred to as distinguished from Manas and the Vijnanas, we can safely state that Citta, when mentioned independently in such phrases as Cittamatram, Svasiddhadriyam, or Cittamatra Vinirmuktarhnopalabityate, means the whole system of conscious life, which is generally designated as mind by Western philosophers. For instance, we have in the Tiang version the following verse corresponding to the Gatha in the Sanskrit text, p. 70. The body, property, and abode. These are no other than the shadow of the mind. The ignorant, unable to understand it, are engaged in theory-making and in controversy. But what they establish is merely mind-made. And outside mind nothing is obtainable. In this quotation, Citta no doubt stands for the totality of the Vijnana system. Indeed, when the Alaya is separated from its company, it ceases to work, that is, to exist, and we have here nothing left but the name. The doctrine expounded in the Lankavatara and also in the Avatamsaka Sutra is known as the Cittamatra and never as the Vijnanamatra or Vijnaptimatra as in the Yogacara school of Asanga and Vasubandhu. Throughout the Lankavatara no mention is made of Vijnanamatra, but either Vijnaptimatra, or Prajanaptimatra, and they are used synonymously. The instances are Prajanaptimatra Tribhavam, Vijnaptimatre Vyavasthanam, Lokar Vijnaptimatram, Vijnaptinamamatrayam, Prajanaptimatrakam, Prajanaptimatra Ca Katham, Pr Ajanaptinamamatriyam. Of these phrases quoted from the sutra, and are the more important, appears in the Sagathakam, which evidently being a later edition I have not made much use of in the preparation of this book. Prajanapti, or Vijnapti, is not here understood in the sense of nor of as is rendered by the later translators, but it means construction, or elaboration, or provisionary name. Where the triple world is said to be nothing but Vijnapti or Prajanapti, it means that the world is mere subjective construction, having no reality or self-substance. The doctrine of Cittamatra, as advocated in the Lankavatara, however, differs from this in that it does not deny the existence of mind itself, from which the objective world pairs with all its forms of particularization. The fault lies in our not recognizing this truth and consequently in adhering to a world of particulars as final reality. Instead of turning back into our own inner world where we can perceive the Tathagatagarbha in its unity and immaculacy. The Tathagatagarbha itself is free from the wrong judgments and discrimination which end in stirring up all kinds of defilements, passions, and outflowings. More will be said about the difference between the Lankavatara's position and that of the Yogacara as regards the doctrine of Citamatra when the subject is treated later on more specifically. As far as the idealistic way of looking at the world is concerned, both systems have something in common. Especially the Lankavata may be interpreted more or less consistently by means of the Yogacara psychology, and indeed this has been frequently attempted by scholars. But as is the case with the Svaosha's awakening of faith, the Lankavatara differs from the Yogacara in one important point, i.e. that while the latter maintains that the Alaya is absolutely pure and has nothing to do with defilements and evil passions, the Lankavatara and Asvaosha maintain the view that the Tathagatagarbha or the Alaya is the storage of the impure as well as the pure. That it is both immanent and transcendental, both relative and absolute. The evolution of the Vijnana system. The whole Vijnana system is explained in the Lankavatara from various points of view which are very difficult to present adequately in another language in which there is no tradition of thought corresponding to the Indian or Buddhist way of thinking. I hope the following interpretation of mine has not altogether misrepresented the original conceptions of the Lankavatara. The Vijnana system is describable from 3 points of reference: its evolution, its modes of being, and its function. By evolution is meant the rise, abiding, and disappearance of the Vijnana. Of this there are 2 forms, Prabandha and Lakshrupiya. Prabandha, meaning incessant continuation, is concerned with an uninterrupted activity of the Vijnana, while Lakshaniya, meaning externa mark, refers to its manifested aspect. When the habit energy stored up in the Alaya by the imprints left behind by thinking, feeling, willing, and acting, either good or bad, is destroyed, there will be no visible signs of them left. This is called the destruction or disappearance of the Vijnana as to their Lakshaniya. When not only the cause of the subject in dependence upon which the Vijnanas can function, but that which supports them, or that which provides them with material, is removed, there will be no more continuation of activity in the Vijnanas. This is the case of disappearance both with the Prabandha and with the Lakshana of the Vijnanas, and the same conditions will also hold good with their rise and continuance. As the sutra, however, does not give any further explanation concerning the difference between, for instance, the disappearance of the Prabandha and that of the Lakshana, the above statement is not enough to show why this distinction between the two is necessary, not only logically but psychologically. For the difference specified above does not seem to be sufficiently warranted. All that we can gather from this is that there is vasana amassed in the Alaya, which acts as cause to the other Vijnanas, and that there is another thing which serves as object to the latter. And, finally, that by the interaction that goes on between subject and object all the Vijnanas grow either active or dormant according to the case. The one most important conception in the system of Vijnanas is vasana. What is this? Psychologically, as was stated before, vasana is memory, for it is something left after a deed is done, mental or physical, and it is retained and stored up in the Alaya as a sort of latent energy ready to be set in motion. This memory or habit energy, or habitual perfuming is not necessarily individual. The Alaya being super-individual holds in it not only individual memory but all that has been experienced by sentient beings. When the Sutras says that in the Alaya is found all that has been going on since beginningless time systematically stored up as a kind of seed, this does not refer to individual experiences, but to something general, beyond the individual, making up in a way the background on which all individual psychic activities are reflected. Therefore, the Alaya is originally pure, it is the abode of Tathagatahud, where no defilements of the particularizing intellect and affection can reach. Purity in terms of logic means universality, and defilement or sin means individuation, from which attachments of various forms are derived. In short, the world starts from memory. Memory in itself as retained in the Alaya universal is no evil. And when we are removed from the influence of false discrimination, the whole Vijnana system woven around the Alaya as center experiences a revulsion toward true perception. This is the gist of the teaching of the LṳNG-GIA. This revulsion marks the culmination of the practical psychology of the LṳNG-GIA. For it is through this fact that the realization of Pratyatmaryajananagokara is possible, and this realization is the central theme of the discourse. As this event takes place in the Alaya, or what is the same thing, in the Tathagatagarbha, which is the basis of all things, it is known as Asraya Paravritti, a revulsion at the basis. Asraya means that on which anything is dependent, and in this case the Alaya is the Asraya on which hangs the working of the Vijnanas and consequently the birth of the whole universe. The new orientation takes place when the egocentric and evil-creating discrimination based upon the dualism of subject and object ceases by the realization that there is no externa world besides what is perceived within the self. And this realization is effected by the cultivation of the intellect known as non-discriminative and transcendental. As long as our ordinary understanding, which is dualistically conditioned, prevails, we cannot go beyond the realm controlled by the seven Vijnanas. And if we cannot go beyond this, we have no chance of penetrating into the reality of things, which means an everlasting transmigration in the world of birth and death. We must look now in the opposite direction, towards the quarter where no Vikalpa takes place, and where no evolution of the Vijnanas has set in. An opening must be made to the non-discriminative and transcendental intellect. The opening is called revulsion. The eye that used to open to the externa world thinking it was reality and got egotistically attached to it, now turns within to see what lies here. It is in this inner world that so many things we have been looking after are accessible now. The inner perception, nirvana, tathata, emancipation, prajnaparamita, the cessation of the seven Vijnanas, etc. This sudden turning is in a sense returning. The Alaya or Tathagatagarbha returns by this to its original purity, happiness, and eternal nature, which is above pravritti and nirvritti. The Alaya has been contaminated by externa impurities amassed by all kinds of philosophising based on the discrimination of subject and object. When the discrimination is in the right direction, it is right, for it points towards the returning. But when it goes astray, as in the case with every one of the ignorant and unenlightened, it stirs up all sorts of trouble, not only intellectually but affectively, the latter being the worst of all troublemakers. As Buddhism, like other Indian systems of thought, puts the first emphasis on intellectual integrity, the right seeing into the situation performs the most important office in the whole program of Buddhist experience. When the intellectual outlook is distorted, the affective and conative disturbances follow, which in turn react upon the essential purity of the Alaya and contaminate it thoroughly. Incorrectness in every form is described by Buddhists in terms of chromatics. Hence the Alaya is dyed, upaklishta, by external impurities. Klesa is generally translated in Buddhism as tormenting and afflicting, causing vexations of spirit, but here in the LṳNG-GIA it is stated as dust or impurity, as it spoils the immaculate Alaya. And since this dust is not native to the Alaya, it is called agantu, the guest who is uninvited. The three modes of the Vijnana. The Vijnanas may be described from their modes of being, that is, from the Lakshajana point of view. There are three signs from which their being may be approached. The first is the Vijnana as evolving, the second the Vijnana as producing definite effects, and the third the Vijnana as remaining in its original nature. The Pravritta Vijnana is a collective name for all the particular Vijnanas that evolve out of the Alaya, when they are considered from the point of view of evolution, while the Alaya is the Vijnana or Siddha that remains undisturbed in its native abode. The Karmavijnana describes the Vijnana in its functioning capacity. The Vijnana in itself does not show any signs of becoming. But these three aspects belong to one Siddha. Thus they are, as the Sutras says, neither different nor not different. The following extract will show us the relation of the Pravritti Vijnana to the other aspects of the Vijnana. As atoms of clay and a lump of clay are neither different nor not different from each other, so are gold and articles of ornament made of it. If, O Mahamati, a lump of clay is different from its atoms, nothing will be produced out of them, but as something is produced out of them, they are not different. But if they are identical, not different, no distinction is possible between atoms of clay and the lump. Likewise, O Mahamati, if the evolved Vijnanas are different from the Alaya each in its original nature, the Alaya will not be their primary cause. If they are identical, the disappearance of the Vijnanas will be the disappearance of the Alaya, but there is no disappearance of their original nature. Thus, O Mahamati, there is no disappearance of the original nature of the Vijnanas, but only the disappearance of the karma aspect of the Vijnanas. If, however, their own original nature should disappear, the Alaya itself would disappear. With the disappearance of the Alaya, the distinction will cease to exist between the Buddhist doctrine and nihilism of some philosophers. According to the latter, when the comprehension of an external world ceases, the Vijnanas cease to continue, their uninterrupted activity since beginningless time will be broken. O Mahamati, the philosophers may explain an uninterrupted evolution of the Vijnanas by a cause, and deny that the evolution is produced by the united action of the eye sense with form and light. They assume another cause. The cause is pradhana, purusha, isvara, time, or atom. Having thus roughly illustrated the relation of the Alaya Vijnana to its evolute Vijnanas, the sutra after a while returns to the question of the actual stirring up of the sense Vijnanas, which are uninterruptedly set in motion like waves in the ocean of Alaya. This being what constitutes the contents of the Dharmakaya. The following quotation gives a glimpse into the working of the Vijnanas and the rise of the Manovijnana, though it is difficult to understand it clearly in details. O Mahamati, the eye sense is awakened by four causes. What are the four? Being attached to the visible world, not knowing that it is mind-made. The tenaciously clinging to forms due to the habit energy of unwarranted speculations and erroneous views from beginningless time. The self-nature of the Vijnana itself. And an eager desire for the multitudinousness of forms and appearances. O Mahamati, owing to these four causes, the waves of the evolving Vijnanas are set in motion in the Alaya, which flows like the waters in the midst of the ocean. O Mahamati, as with the eye sense, so with the other senses, the perception of the objective world takes place simultaneously and regularly, i.e., constantly in all the sense organs, atoms, and pores. It is like the mirror reflecting images, and, O Mahamati, like the wind-tossed ocean, the ocean of mind is disturbed by the wind of objectivity, and the Vijnana-waves rage without ceasing. The cause and the manifestation of its action are not separated the one from the other. And on account of the karma aspect of the Vijnana being closely united with the original aspect, the self-nature of form or an objective world, rupasvabhava, is not accurately ascertained, and, O Mahamati, thus evolves the system of the five Vijnanas. When together, O Mahamati, with these five Vijnanas, the objective world is regarded as the reason of the differentiation and appearances are definitely prescribed, we have the Manovijnana. Caused by this is the birth of the body or system of the Vijnanas, Pafikavijnanakaya. They do not, however, reflect thus. We, mutually dependent, come to get attached to the visible world which grows out of one's own mind and is discriminated by it. They i.e., the Vijnanas and Manovijnana rise simultaneously, mutually conditioning, and not broken up, but each taking in its own field of representations. The way the Alaya Vijnana works in our system of Vijnanas is extremely subtle. And it is the privilege of the highly trained mind of the Bodhisattva only that can fully grasp the inner significance of the Alaya. Those who train themselves in tranquilization are not always conscious of the subtlety of the working of their habit energy. And they imagine that they enter into a perfect state of tranquilization by annihilating all the Vijnanas. But the fact is, they have not annihilated the Vijnanas, though they may be in a state of tranquilization, for their seeds of habit energy are not fully destroyed. What they have destroyed is simply the habit of grasping and discriminating the objective world of particulars. So subtle indeed, O Mahamati, is the working of the Alaya Vijnana that only the Tathagatas and those bodhisattvas who are already advancing through the stages of bodhisattvahood can penetrate into it. It is beyond the powers of the samadhi and prajna acquired by Sravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and philosophers. The functions of the 8 Vijnanas. From the functional point of view, there are 8 Vijnanas. Alaya, Manas, Manovijnana, and the 5 sense Vijnanas. But they may be grouped under 2 headings. Khyati Vijnanas and Vastaprativikalpa Vijnana. Khyati, from kya, means to perceive, to manifest, and this function of the Vijnana is to perceive or to reflect things that appear before it just as the mirror reflects all forms before it.